Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Chip Brownlee. I am a reporter at The Trace, and I write our Trajectory newsletter. As gun violence has declined in cities across America, community violence intervention and prevention strategies have emerged as a critical component of successful public safety strategies. But at this pivotal moment, the field faces unprecedented challenges. Federal funding cuts are threatening programs that are proving effective, while demand for the services is continuing, even in cities that are continuing to struggle with violence. This panel, we're going to explore what's working best, and we're also going to think about the future of this work at a time where there's a lot of uncertainty. So now I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then when I finish the introductions, the panelists are going to come up. First, we have Chico Tillman. He has spent a decade building infrastructure for street outreach work, and he's now the executive director of the Community Violence Intervention Leadership Academy at the University of Chicago. Under Matt Rader's leadership at the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, Philadelphia has become a national leader in using cleaning and greening strategies as a key approach to public safety. Dion Sumter oversees the city's official group violence intervention programs as Philadelphia's Deputy Director of Violence Prevention Initiatives. Ben Struhl is the Executive Director of the Crime and Justice Lab at the University of Pennsylvania. He's often brought on to evaluate violence intervention work, as he did in Baltimore, where his review offered lessons on moving from individual programs to coordinated citywide strategies. And Katarina Roman is a professor in the Department of Criminal Justice at Temple University who works at the intersection of criminology and community health. Her recent studies focus on implementation and sustainability of evidence-based, data-driven violence reduction programs aimed at both individual level and neighborhood level change. So I'll go ahead and bring the panel up now. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm really excited for this, what I hope is going to be an important conversation about kind of where we go from here at this moment. The past few years have been really a period of growth for violence prevention and intervention. We've seen the massive influx of federal funding for violence intervention programs that then trickled down to cities, including here in Philadelphia. But at this moment, those grants are being cut. We've seen the qualifications for those grants change. And I want to ask each of you, what do you think the goal should be at this moment where there's so much change, based on what you've learned over the past 3-4 years? Dr. Tillman, can we start with you?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank Trace for giving me this opportunity to have this dialogue with this amazing panel. I've been in the work of violence prevention, as it was called originally, for about 15 years. And right when we begin to understand that we need this comprehensive or ecological systems approach where everyone be involved, and we begin to really make strides, then it was cut. So like I'm perplexed how you can look at the data and see over the last 3 to 4 years we have been constantly decreasing. And I think here's where it becomes a little bit challenging. Sometimes we speak in terms of numbers. We might say, well, violence has went down 27% in the last 3 years, or 29%, as opposed to humanizing and saying tens of thousands of people are alive because we're doing this. I think when you begin to humanize it and personalize it and say, because we're doing particular work in these particular communities, there are human beings that are alive that otherwise would be dead, it resonates more than us just using numbers, because numbers tend to make us equate it to, is it worth the investment? And one of the things I like for us to consider is how much is a life worth, and how much are thousands of lives being saved. and to change course after thousands of lives are being saved really is hard to understand for me at this point in time.
Thanks so much, yeah, all of you for being here. Really appreciate it. And Chico put that so well, and I agree with him so completely that I'm gonna try and go in like the counterpoint of that, which is that a lot of people don't believe that CVI saves those lives. And again, I agree with you completely, Chico. It's unconscionable in so many cases, and especially with the international work we do. I think you can almost quantify the deaths that have been caused. But a lot of people don't believe. And why is it that they don't believe? I work on strategies, so making sure cities have strategies to reduce violence, knitting things together cohesively to drive to outcomes. I was talking about strategies to someone, and they said, "Oh yeah, I saw that strategy in place in my jurisdiction, and it was terrible." And so I asked them to describe it, and they said, "Oh yeah, they brought a bunch of guys up on stage and yelled at them from the audience." And I was like, well, that's not a strategy. What you're describing, they might have been saying it was the same thing, but that's not the same thing. So I think this is a big problem in our field. We keep putting out terms and different messages, and they're describing different things, and there's a lot of lack of understanding of what specifically is needed. I know everyone on this panel can actually talk a lot about that specificity, which is where the field needs to evolve in this time of scarcity.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. And I want to thank, there's so many people in this room that I've learned so much from, that I've spent time in your community and in your neighborhood just learning. And that is a privilege, so I just want to acknowledge that. And I want to follow up on what both Ben and Chico are saying. I think we're at a time that we really start to be thinking about best practices, not just programs, and understanding the nuance of what is happening in these programs, some of which we're questioning, some we think from looking at an evaluation report, oh, this is a slam dunk. We're going to take this program here and put it here. But what is it about that program? What is the process that's working? The other thing we need to remember is that just because a program is reducing shootings or gun violence doesn't mean it doesn't do harm. How do we think about the well-being of our young people and those young adults? It's time, and me as a scholar and a researcher, it's really time that we be thinking alongside of these wins and the challenges that we have. How do we think about youth and young adult well-being?
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you to the Trace for having me as well. Similar to Dr. Chico's point, it has really changed the landscape in the city of Philadelphia. To be able to see this year 173 organizations receive city-based funding, 173 organizations that are doing amazing work. The pulse, and I think my brother Meekins can tell you, in the city of Philadelphia is different. In the past, individuals who were involved in violence prevention work were the individuals who were deeply impacted by gun violence. But today you have so many different institutions, hospitals, universities, nonprofit organizations, all wanting to be a part of the same fight because we now understand what works. Why deviate from that? We understand that we can't lock ourselves out of this particular problem, but prevention, intervention, those methods work. That is why we're here today. CVI is a term fairly new, but so many different jurisdictions in this country is adopting evidence-based practices. And it's not just Philadelphia, it's so many other cities in this country who are utilizing evidence-based practices to help combat gun violence. And in the city of Philadelphia, we're doing it really well, and it's exciting times for us, but we are learning what works. So for us to now deviate from that particular process is damaging, it's disheartening, and there are so many community-based organizations that are just doing and spearheading this charge. And to see all these different individuals, everyone within the same particular space who probably wouldn't be sharing the same space 10 years ago, but to be where we're at today, it's encouraging. And we must, keep our foot on the gas pedal to ensure that we don't have what we experienced in 2021, 562 individuals who lost their lives. And today we're at 197. So there's still more work to get done. And I'm optimistic that we'll get there.
So our work is largely in the environmental world, changing the physical urban environment with residents and community organizations. And we've been doing that for 50 years, but we therefore also know how easy it is to take that for granted. And I think my focus in this moment is gains have been secured, but gains must, to continue to have those gains, we must continue to invest and not take the outcomes for granted. There's often a tendency in government and philanthropy to kind of think of, there's one giant solution that we can implement and the problem is eradicated. And many problems require just continuing to do the evidence-based things that we know lead to good outcomes. And this is a moment where that risk of forgetting that those gains came from somewhere and required continued spending matters. And the second factor I'll push is just to double down on the importance of sticking with evidence-based solutions. There's often a pull for, people or popular wisdom-based solutions, and what has worked in this case is following the evidence, and that it requires continued diligence in a political environment to keep insisting on evidence-based solutions as the guide.
I think one of the things that I've seen over the past 4 or 5 years is as people have started using the term community violence intervention, it started to morph into a bunch of different things. There's things like group violence intervention, there's street outreach, there's cure violence, advanced peace, all these different kind of strategies that exist out there. Katerina, could I come to you and ask you, what do we know about those different strategies and what actually works? Because we've been, we're talking about CVI and using evidence-based strategies, but what are those and what do they look like?
Do we have all day?
Yeah.
What
We have 48 minutes.
I think the point I would like to make about CVI, community violence intervention, I think it's really important to think about how a program or a partnership comes together and who is leading that. And my research over the years has shown that those solutions that are coming from the community that rise up with a fiscal agent, to be specific, or a leader that's based in the community are really the ones that have longevity and sustainability, right? So I would argue that we need to be thinking about our credible messenger-based programs that are rooted in our long-serving community institutions. It should be CLVI. It should be community-led violence intervention, because of the different way to think about those practices. For me, the number one feature or practice in a program that works is the relational opportunities that are developed, those pro-social relationships that people like this young man right here are helping to facilitate and buoy, right? CVI, in my mind, relentless outreach and engagement that is sustained. So there's enough dosage, right? And I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of what that is, but it's about relationships. And who is building those trusting relationships? The community, the credible messengers. You don't have to necessarily have lived experience, but there is a risk if you attach the government, an institution to it, you lose a third of the young people. You lose a half of the young people. How do we think about developing community-led supports that are deep enough and have that investment?
Can I just add in, because I think that's all so right, but I think I just want to clarify for the audience, because I think we have the same understanding. There's really lots and lots of evidence that CVI works, and that really shouldn't be in the question. The big questions of our field is who can we make it work for, and how can we have it exist in larger systems? So just to use a metaphor, and my staff knows I'm way too fond of doing metaphors. Think about a smoke detector in a house. Smoke detector is life-saving. It will save your life. If there's a fire, you'll hear it if you're sleeping and you'll get out the door. You don't blame a smoke detector if your street burns down because the fire department never showed up, right? And this is the lack of understanding we have of a lot of time. We see CVI, it is saving lives, and then the fire department never shows up, and we say, well, what happened? That street burnt down. So the two big questions are really, how can we make it work for the right people, And how can we make it exist in larger systems to be effective on a citywide level or at a neighborhood level?
Could I jump in real quick? I got to say I'm guilty of one thing. I was a part of a small group that created the term or coined the term CVI with the last administration. And the reason why we came up with CVI is because prior to that, we were using the public health term violence prevention, and it was too broad because it encompassed after school, daycare, the YMCA, the Boys Club, the Girls Scouts. So when we were thinking about funding and we advocated for funding for CVI or for individuals at the highest risk, we had to go back and forth and create a definition that would allow the groups that were working with individuals who were potentially most likely to be a perpetrator or victim of violence. Now, the reason why we call it community violence intervention, because we understand that it takes a whole ecosystem. It takes everybody. Once we meet individuals, and here's the power of CVI that gets neglected. These groups' power is access to individuals at the highest risk. Now, why we need everybody is once we access this individual, the individual might need mental health services. The individual might need substance use disorder. Now, an individual that's an outreach don't have all the, no one organization is like Walmart where they have all of these different individuals and specialties. So we partner with other agencies to give these specific individuals the needs that are the underlying factors that are the root causes of violence, so we can address them and not just this surface thing where we're putting out fires like firefighters, but once we access them, we could get them to the proper agency that can help them with their problem.
Chico, can I ask you, is it, to you as community violence intervention, is the key component is that you're working with people who are either have been shooters or are at risk of being a shooter? What's the difference between community violence prevention and intervention?
Let me say this, right? If we wanted to stop something from happening, the best way to do it is to work with the people that's going to commit the act. If you think about it, and that's what CVI does. We work with individuals who are most likely to do it, and we do it through three ways. Because you want to say, Chico, how are you? Are you clairvoyant? How are you? One of them is social networking. We use an analytical way to where a computer generates who's most likely to be the next victim, who's most likely to be the next perpetrator. The second one is more common sense, the criminal justice system. This person has already committed a ton of violent acts, so we know they have a proclivity to be violent. So we work with them prior to them coming home and committing another act. Soon as they get out, we working with them to change their situational decision-making through CBT, CBI, help them better resolve situations without using aggression. And the third one, which makes the most sense, is the community. Whoever been to high school in here or grammar school? You know, if you're in grammar school, you know who the bully is. You know who the troublemaker is. You know the one who's causing problems. So what we do is we use people in the community and we ask them, who is the one that's bringing fear into the community? And as opposed to ostracizing them or putting them in isolation, what we do now, we draw them in and we try to get them services to find out where they're committing these acts.
Deanna, I want to come to you because I'm curious. Philadelphia has a big ecosystem of different programs that work on either the intervention aspect of things or the prevention aspect of things, and probably a bigger range outside of that. But how do you think about coordinating those programs so wires aren't getting crossed, so everybody's working on the same page, and how that fits into this?
And I'll tell you, I know my colleague Joshua Harris would tell you, I have the best job in the world. I love my job. I have the amazing opportunity to work with police, probation, the courts, the community, social service providers, mothers who've lost children to gun violence, and I have to bring it all home. And it's a tall task, and I know my colleague Megan McDonald is in this room. In 2020, when the pandemic hit, we wanted to bring group violence intervention to the city of Philadelphia, and our task was to merge the worlds of police, social service providers, credible messengers to all be within the same room, the same space. to be able to bring this strategy to life. And what I learned from that particular process was every entity just wished to have shared ownership. That's all it is. We all have the same mission. We're all doing such amazing work, and we're all a part of the same puzzle. But it's just really about bringing it all together. And it's okay if I give you an example of what that collaboration looks like. In the summertime, we had a triple shooting in West Philadelphia. It was group member involved. I had two of my particular groups, one from the 19th, one from the 18th, who were in conflict with one another. From then, the Philadelphia Police Department pinged me, said, Deion's triple shooting, group member involved. So what I do in my office, I initiate what's called rapid response. I am going to have all of my city-based community partners on speed dial by way of this email. And once I hit send, every partner knows what is expected of them. Each shooting victim, we have our victim assistance officers who are at the hospitals working with the HVIVs to engage each shooting victim and next of kin to figure out what occurred and are you safe. Because it's a group member involved, I loop in GVI. GVI is going to engage both groups. I can't tell one group to put the guns down, not the other. So we're going to engage both groups, let them know that there will be swift and clear consequences for one's actions. However, there is supportive services readily available if you need it. 3 of my group members were in fear of their lives. We were able to relocate them by way of the Office of Victim Advocate. That same night, I had 3 of those group members in a hotel where they was able to remain for 30 days to get out of Dodge. There was also biological matter left on the crime scene where we was able to have our direct crime scene clean up all of the biological matter, because I don't need young boys and girls in that particular community to see such matter on the ground. EMIR, which is our therapeutic partners, they knocked on every single door on that block to ensure that everyone on this corner, in this area, is eligible for free therapeutic services. We also work with Mothers in Charge, where they was able to provide group counseling to any community member and family who was in need. 211, which is our violence prevention hotline, we sent the ping alert to everyone in the community. These are the resources that are readily available to you. And then lastly, our CCIP team, who was out there from 12 p.m. to 4 a.m. in the morning, they are in the community and they are going to get down to the bottom of what occurred. For us, is just being able to just allow everyone who are already going to respond to this incident, why not do it together? Because it's way more efficient. We're not duplicating efforts. We're not stepping on each other's toes. There's no reason why we need 3 or 4 teams at the hospital when we already have a team there that can then disseminate the information back to us as well. So that's what the collaboration has been like for me. And I'm got the best job, man. I love what we do. And it just has been such an amazing continuum for us over the past few years. And all of our partners, in the beginning, they didn't play well. I think Megan can contest to that. But we were able to really bring it home and to really create this unique ecosystem that is alive and well and ready to go.
Can I just quickly underline what Deion said that's so important, which is that is a citywide strategy in action. And if you think about a lot of CVI groups out there, and this gets to the skepticism point, they are dropped into a neighborhood or they decide to start in a neighborhood themselves and they have no connection to anything. They have none of that. And so some of them are brilliant and they're able to figure it out and they're able to make it work without all those resources. But a lot of them, even with good people in place, can't do it if they don't have everything that Deion was just describing. And that's where the field needs to go. It can't be only reliant on some brilliant guy who's in some neighborhood and he's known it his whole life and he has great relations with everyone, is super charismatic and has great knowledge and really smart. It can't be relying on those folks because those folks are too rare. So everything Deion said is where the field needs to go. And we have a lot of great talent and that's gonna be part of it, but it's gonna be part of it, like Chico said, as part of an ecosystem.
Matt, I want to ask you because I think we have some CVI programs up here that work a lot with people, and you're a place-based initiative, and you're thinking about cleaning and greening in parks and green spaces. How do you feel like your work fits into the coordination conversation when it comes to cities trying to direct gun violence prevention?
So you're right about the method, but I think it's important to keep people at the center. So what we're trying to do essentially is take the urban environment that we all live in and turn it into a productive environment for the things people need to live lives that they feel good about. And so that is creating order in the environment. That's creating business and economic opportunity. That's creating physical conditions where you can walk to work or the bus stop and feel comfortable and safe. That's creating direct employment. That's creating space for your kids to play. And the method to get there are the tools of cleaning and greening vacant lots, planting and tending trees, building community gardens, but doing it all in the way Katerina described, which is supporting community organizations and individuals to do these things. And also doing it in a citywide model like you were describing. So we have models for these things that work citywide, but they're delivered by community organizations in their places. So I think the core idea is the people are still at the center. It's just the tool we're using is the environment to actually create opportunities. So cleaning and greening a vacant lot, you see the physical manifestation of fence, trees, and turf. The reality is that program's been constructed in a way that the work is divided among small contractors of differing skill levels that are a mix of nonprofit and for-profit organizations that we bring through a development journey. That's a lot of what our team does. They then employ local residents to do that work. Those local residents are recruited and trained by us in partnership with community. Similarly with trees and community gardens, which are volunteer-led, it could be done just by hiring the largest landscape contractor to go clean and green the lot. That, I believe, would not yield the same result. I think the result comes from the method, which is trying to meet the full range of economic, social, and environmental needs that make people feel good about their lives.
Can I add to that?
Yes, absolutely.
I would just like to add that this is where data comes in about layering the initiatives, because we often say we have this problem here. If we take your discussion about people within places, when we come in with an intervention, regardless of whether it is a physical intervention to beautify the block, clean or green, or you're working with young people and you're attaching them to after-school programs or midnight basketball programs, whatever it is, we need to be thinking about what is happening in real time in those blocks and on that neighborhood, but also outside. Are we pushing out the problem just to solve it in one area? I just want to keep that in mind, that when we're talking about doing something holistically and layering, we also want to be thinking, even if we are people within places, if that place is a illegal drug market on a corner and we're moving people who are unhoused, somewhere else, did we just move the problem 3 blocks over, right? Are we just saying, okay, look at K&A. K&A looks great now, but what about those side streets? Are we paying attention when we're layering these initiatives and using data to go deep and understand how economic opportunity is available to everyone?
Chico, can you talk at the Leadership Academy, which I've heard recently is in high demand these days, and that it's kind of hard to get into. How do y'all talk about using data in the programs that you're advising and the program leaders?
Yeah, just to give you a little backdrop or context, one of the reasons we created a Leadership Academy was with the influx of the ARPA dollars, we knew that we had to elevate the business acumen of community-based organizations and also offices of violence prevention around the country to get a standardized language and help them understand the importance of research in CVI. I recently spoke last year at the National Researchers Conference, and I blame the researchers. I'm a researcher too. I blame them for a lot of the challenges in CVI. And they, of course, they said, why? I said, because we create the models. Researchers typically create models and practitioners implement them. I say, so if it's something wrong with the model, then we need to get back to the drawing board. Researchers create the model. researchers say what's working and what's not working. Researchers understand that you can't drive a car with just 4 wheels and no engine. So researchers also understand how much resources need to be in a particular ecosystem in order for it to have functionality. So if we keep giving one organization $2 million and say, solve all the problems in the community by yourself, like you said, where we were at 10 years ago at an embryonic phase when we just talked about credible messengers, we're going to get minimal results. But when we begin to hold everybody accountable within the ecosystem, then we're going to see what? Tremendous results. And what the data has shown is that where we've seen the most amount of results, New York. New York went from 1,400 homicides in the 90s all the way down to 200 homicides and has been claimed the safest city in America, safest large city. LA. LA went from 1,400 homicides in the 90s down to 300. It's no coincidence that those two cities has the largest investment in CVI in the country. Now, and where we've seen large investments in human capital, we've seen results. Because what we're doing is now we're identifying people who can identify the people who are the drivers of violence. That's the main thing we got to think about when we think about CVI. It's this connectivity to the drivers of violence to get them into some situations where they can get the resources they need to address those root causes that's causing them to commit those heinous acts.
The research aspect of community violence intervention is really interesting to me because even though the term, which you were talking about how you helped coin it a few years ago, even though the term is relatively new, the work has been going on for decades. And there's still not a ton of research on it compared to other public safety, cleaning and greening. There's quite a bit of research on the fact that cleaning up at vacant lots can reduce gun violence by significant amounts, 20%, I think, more than 20% in Philly with the program here. So I'm wondering, why is the research on CVI struggling to catch up? And how do we do more of it so that people have more information that they can use? Ben?
Yep. I mean, I think the work the University of Chicago has done on READY really tells a really potent story about research on CVI, its value, and its challenges. So a lot of what you see in terms of CVI organizations that have been evaluated are not working with the highest risk people. That's the point Chico made. And it's really challenging because if you talk to all the groups, every single group you ever talk to says, we're working with the highest risk people. Those groups over there, they're not working with the highest group people. Everyone says that. So you need the data because often you don't understand. I worked with a group really closely. They let me in under the hood and they said, all right, yeah, we got 9 guys out there in the community. 3 of them are great. They really understand the community. We know that. 2 of them suck. They're terrible. They're not doing their jobs. They're cheating. They're not working, and we want to get rid of them as soon as we can. The other 4, we have no idea. And so lots and lots of specificity is needed in terms of the data, what you're thinking about. Back to READY very quickly. READY did this amazing program where they were actually trying to get to the highest risk people in Chicago, which again, most of the evaluations do not address that highest risk population. And READY said, okay, we're going to look at 2 different ways that we're going to find these highest risk people. One is a data machine learning algorithm. And the second is using community folks to refer in, community referrals from outreach workers. And I think a lot of the folks at University of Chicago thought their machine learning algorithm was going to outperform the people from the community organizations, from the community organizers. And what they actually found was that the folks identified by the machine learning algorithm, 0 effect of that READY program, 0. The folks identified by the outreach workers, very strong effect. That's how important specificity is to this, because I can think of one big difference between the people identified by the machine learning algorithm and the outreach workers, which is that the people identified by the outreach workers had at least one really good pro-social relationship in their lives. And the outreach workers understand something that can't always be captured in data. So we need to get to a point where our programs are figuring out how they can reliably bring in the folks that we're going to deliver an impact with. And that's actually work we're trying to do here in Philadelphia, which is one of the replications of READY, known as P3.
Chip, it's not an answer to your question, but the research is one thing. The ability of the research to influence policy adopted and budgets is a different thing. And as you note, in the case of cleaning and greening vacant lots, thanks to Gina South and Charlie Brannis and John McDonald and Ben's work, there is a lot of research. But, you know, we're still only managing 30% of the vacant lots in Philadelphia, despite knowing that that intervention reduces gun violence by up to 29% and can create employment. So there is still a gap between even the most data-proven interventions and public policy actually being adopted. And I think that is equally important to generating more research, because just research after research can make the case, but it's not leading to change.
I'd like to address your question. There's 2 points I'd like to make here. One, following up on what Ben is saying, I want to just point out that it was the community, it was Eddie Bocanegra, learning from Philadelphia ceasefire, who developed the READY model, right? In the community, learning, being there, realizing what individuals want, taking that community message to Heartland Alliance to grow and expand that, and then saying, we need a partner. I know I have something good here. I need an academic partner. Okay, point one. Point two, if you look at historically in previous administrations in Philadelphia, what research studies have talked about the impact of a violence reduction program, the overwhelming majority of those research studies were funded because that academic PI raised the funding herself or himself, right? And it took having violence going way, way up for a lot of local philanthropy. Thank you to the Neubauer Family Foundation, the Green Family Foundation, and others that are thinking about how do we look at innovations in the community? How do we take the limited research on CVI and partner the innovation they see with academics to bring them together to create a lasting and sustainable partnership that will then do what the Chicago Crime Lab has done. If you think about what are the evidence-based programs we come back to, a lot of them are rooted in work of Chicago organizations working on right alongside of the crime lab. We also need investment for those partnerships to go forward, like we're seeing now, thanks to the Civic Coalition, the value of putting those partners together to understand what's working, what can be replicated, what can we move from Chicago to Philadelphia.
And
I just want to say, we are going to take audience questions at the end. So I think we're putting up a slide now. If you want to submit your questions there, in about 11 minutes, we will start taking some audience questions. But Dan, go ahead.
No, absolutely. And I think from what we've seen from us is sometimes it may be hard to measure what you prevent, right? We've engaged by way of GVI, P3, in a lot of our strategies where we are working with those individuals who fit that spectrum to kill to be killed. Like these are the most violent individuals who are deeply embedded in gun violence. They're in our office every single day, and we find ourselves talking them off of the ledge. We're with them when they get that social media response or that threat of someone telling them that they're coming to harm them. We're with them when they get, or we see a social media post or a video of a group antagonizing on the death of this client's brother. And they're also in the same corner where they took his brother's life. And he wishes to respond, and we intercept. We divert. It may be hard to measure that. We may have stopped something, but no one would know. But it's really on the basis of the work that's being done on a day-by-day basis that far too often people may not see, or sometimes people don't even understand, so to speak. So I think for us, it's really by way of READY. P3 in the city of Philadelphia has just been doing amazing work. I look forward to working with you, Ben. That's the announcement that we were talking about. But no, but overall, I think for us, just the work that's done behind the scenes that people often don't see sometimes are the things that we may miss when it comes down to evaluating.
Can I just
And then
highlight, Dion, when I first saw the work Dion was doing with GVI, it was life-saving work, and we had an evaluation showing it was life-saving work. In the places he was working, violence was going up as part of a citywide trend in Philadelphia. And some people saw this and said, well, how is this possible? And it's like, well, yes, you can be saving lives as violence is going up. That's why a city needs a strategy. And the city didn't have a strategy at that time. And I said to the funders, what Dion is doing is starting to build a strategy that didn't exist before. And you will see that in citywide numbers. That's where the citywide numbers come in, and that's why Philadelphia is down, is that a strategy exists that didn't exist before. And the people before were working really, really, really hard, actually, but they weren't putting together a cohesive strategy, and there's a difference to that.
Listen, we was rumbling, y'all. We was rumbling.
I think it's critical that we transition and think more ecological than thinking like we did when we were antiquated, because it's problematic for me to try and prove I save lives in and of itself, but it's not problematic to show every touch point that I had with somebody at the highest risk, every time I de-escalated something, every time I mediated something, every time I provided them a resource. Those are the things. I think when we get caught up into trying to take credit and sole responsibility, it becomes problematic to prove our existence. I know y'all love the Eagles here. When the Eagles lose, who lose? Not just the offensive line. I'm just saying, not even, if you think about a team, the quarterback don't say, I'm the only one lost, or I'm not. No, the whole team lose. And when we think comprehensively or as a team, we could see what a ball got dropped and improve it. But if we begin to think singularly or put the responsibility on one entity to resolve a citywide problem, we're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to put pressure on people, like you say, to what? Skew the data to make it look like that, because their mere existence can't be because they have to prove to you they saved a life.
It is a difficult question, though, right? Because the outcome that you want is reduced violence and fewer shootings, but that's difficult to measure and, like you said, attribute to a single organization when there's, as you can see on the panel, a range of different strategies in different cities. And how do y'all think about that?
This is the big failure point, right, though, that Chico's talking about. So we've had generations of mayors who have not had the confidence that they can reduce violence. And so on a mayoral level in cities, and these have been Democratic mayors by and large, on a mayoral level, there is not a real effort to say, we need to put in place the systems of accountability, as Chico said, and tracking and data to say, what can we actually get done? I can speak to Baltimore, where Baltimore, it looks like, is going to end the year cutting its violence in half. This is a city that had high violence for years and years and years, was the most dangerous city of its size in America. Everything that Baltimore put in place was all based on key performance indicators for the groups involved. Something happens, that's assigned to a group, and we're going to find out what the person did around that incident. Who did they talk to? How many times? Was it persistent? Did the person actually ever end up enrolling in a program? And that needs to happen at a city-level coordination. And it needs to happen with mayoral leadership. And if that mayoral leadership is lacking, there is very, very, very little that even the most brilliant group can do to change a citywide tide on its own.
Matt, do you find that that is an issue in your work too, in kind of justifying the purpose of cleaning and greening the lots, or do you struggle with that?
I think greening is by and large seen as kind of fluffy and nice to have. So we plant some trees where we can plant them. We clean and green some vacant lots. I've had cities come here to learn our work, and they say, next year we're going to clean and green one lot for 1 year. And my answer is, don't even bother. Like, that's not the point. This is about systemic change. So yeah, it's seen as fluffy, despite having strong research evidence, because I think it seems too easy, and that does affect how it's funded. There are funders in this room who have been transformational, call it Green Family Foundation again, Neubauer, others who invest in this work over and over again to keep it going. And in our case, the city of Philadelphia, PICO, others have been those partners. But it is a hard case to make because people see the environmental solutions recede into the background. And yet, if you say to somebody, imagine your block, and often when you're talking to a person with the pocketbook or the policy making, their block is well maintained and has trees and no litter and probably not a bunch of vacant lots. And then you say, look at this block, and it's absolutely intuitive, just at the physical level, how that makes your life experience different. You add the economic and the social components that our work brings of knitting people together, creating employment, and it's hugely transformational. But despite that intuition, people can't see it, they think it's fluffy, and they kind of take it as a nice to have. So my personal mission is to make it a must have. We should all expect to live in an environment that is well cared for and green and attractive.
Is that so part of what I'm hearing is the consistency, right? The through line of continuing a program past the pilot stage. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you make sure that the work that you're doing is actually sustainable long term? And then Dion, I want to go to you after, and if you could weigh in on the same thing.
So this is like a gigantic issue. So much work that is grant funded is short term, right? It's a pilot research study, maybe it's a 3-year project grant. And the communities where those projects happen know it. And it's frustrating because maybe they build a great youth sports program and it's a 3-year project grant, and then at the end of 3 years it's gone. And somebody else got another grant to do another sports program, but it's a whole different set of relationships in a different place. And that discontinuity creates huge challenges for community. We've done a project with Nicetown and Tioga in North Philadelphia for the past 4 years that is a long-term project. And the idea is the whole neighborhood worked together to create a vision for what it wanted to change about the neighborhood. We figured out what greening solutions could do to support that. And we essentially put ourselves on the line to find the money to keep that going. And that's very different than we got a project grant and we came for 3 years. So first round of funding starts to expire. It's on us to try to find the next round of funding. And the community's side is to do the work needed to build successful interventions in the community. But finding that willingness to invest continuously in things that work is hard. I imagine it also affects the CVI programs. And it was kind of the point I started with, which is at this moment, the most important thing is to keep doing the things that work and know that if you stop doing them, you will also lose the gains.
Is that this can be for everybody, but Dion, maybe we can start with you. Is that where the funding for programs, violence prevention and intervention generally should maybe be in the budget versus a grant that is necessarily temporary?
Yes, I'll tell you, sustainability is key for us, and it also can become very anxiety-inducing. When you're dealing with human lives, it takes time. Oftentimes, when we have these projects or these programs that are in these pilot stages, we're expecting them to give us a 6 to 12 months fix of the issue, of the problem. And what we've been seeing by way of some of our strategies, it takes at least 2 or 3 years to really get these young brothers where they need to go. Last year, we had about a total of 32 guys by way of our GVI program graduate from Future Track. But I can tell you, those 32 young brothers been with me for 3 to 4 years. They've been with me for a period, and it requires a lot of hand-holding when you're dealing with individuals that are residing in some of the most violent communities in the city of Philadelphia, who've had a plethora of adverse childhood experiences, sexual abuse, experienced parental incarceration, substance use, all these plethora of adverse experiences, that is their reality. And I know for me, and I was sharing with Katerina and others earlier, I did spend 3 years of my life in prison. And when I came home, I didn't know. I wasn't ready. It took case managers and mentors and programs to help me see what was possible, but it took time. It required 6 to 8 years of being in college. I didn't go the 4-year route. I needed time because this wasn't my experience. You know, no one from my family went to college. No one from my community that I graduated high school went to college, right? So to understand what's believable, what's realistic, what's next, wasn't my world, wasn't my space. So when I'm in these environments with individuals that want to help me, obviously, because it's not familiar, the trust isn't there. And I also need to see people like me who have my story make it out as well. And if I don't see that, it's going to be somewhat of a hard sell. And it was for me. You know, so when we are engaging these individuals, that mistrust is already there, right? We're not the first ones that have made a promise, and we damn sure better keep it. But we've realized because of their experience where we are hoping to meet them where they are, it takes a lot of time. And I think it's unfair that oftentimes we don't give those programs enough time to really give the results. A lot of the strategies have been around in the city of Philadelphia since 2019, 2020, but it took 2023, 2024 for us to really see its impact. So I think sustainability, time, allows us to really see its full impact of what it can become.
I think, I do this all the time, and we even had like a dollar jar where every time we did it wrong, we had to put $1 in. This word strategy and program are used interchangeably a lot, and they're not the same. And so this is why your question is so important, is that Philadelphia has cut its violence in half. Baltimore has cut its violence in half. No city is going to cut its violence in half through programs. Never. Never. Programs do save lives. But no city is ever going to cut its violence in half through programs. Only through strategy is a city going to be able to sustainably and seriously reduce its violence. And the strategy is exactly what Dion describes, putting together an interlocking group of systems or initiatives to respond to an incident like he was talking about earlier. The stuff that Matt does, again, it's strategic. It's thinking about how to transform a community. And so many people look at this stuff. They look at the research we do at UPenn on Matt's programs. They say, oh, this is great. We'll get some trucks. We'll get some guys. We'll go out there. That's a program. That's not a strategy. And they fail. They don't work. Or they have minimal results. People see them, and they start feeling cynical. There are lots and lots of cities in this country that have invested millions and millions and millions of dollars in programs, and they have been flat in violence, or violence has gone up with a serious thing like the pandemic. And people look at it and they say, what is that millions and millions and millions of dollars doing? And that is a huge challenge to our field. So we can't be thinking about programs only. The programs are crucial, they're essential, and they do save lives, but they have to be linked together if they're going to really make an impact.
Could I say something real quick? We have to make CVI a permanent part of the public ecosystem and the public safety strategy, period. You're not going to attract the best professionals if you can't guarantee them they're going to have a job. The reason why we're seeing decreases is because the investment is higher and people have that assurity that they're going to have a job and they have benefits. I don't care how credible you are, if you don't got an accountant, that's why we have trouble. If you don't have an accountant, you don't have people that can manage people. If you got everybody from the block, it's going to tank. You have access. The only way you're going to attract the best and the brightest in the community is what? If they have a surety or that certainty that there's going to be sustainability. So it makes no sense even, and you're asking people to go out there and put their life on the line day after day with no assurance that they're going to have a job in 12 months. That's ridiculous. So what typically happens is we have low retention. A person does, you might have the greatest CVI worker, he stays there. When he accumulates enough skills, what? He go get another job in a different sector where he has some job security. So we have to have that for sustainability in order to have retention.
Yeah. Do we have audience questions?
So many.
Cater quickly, and then we'll go do the audience questions.
Just one thing about the funding question. I think it's really important for sustainability, and the city has been wonderful the last couple of years is understanding who your grantee is, who the organization is that's receiving those dollars and supporting them. Are you funding a program that is services, or is the funding able to go to the general operating expenses, right? And being aware of what is needed for that organization. It's not just a win to give out $20 million. We did this, 85 groups, programs were funded as part of this strategy. It's really knowing who those organizations are. How are we supporting them to the best of our ability and creating that network that we're all talking about so it's a win for everyone?
I swear this is super close. Super quickly. But so many people think about it like they're turning a dial, like we're going to turn up the dial on the spending, turn up the dial. No, if you have a strategy at a city level, then where you must spend starts to become obvious. That's right. And so that's the takeaway.
Joy, audience questions.
Okay. I'm going to start with something that's related to what Dr. Tillman was just saying. Often community members we rely on to do this work are not paid a living wage. How do we fix this?
By paying them a living wage. I think we have to, often we penalize people when there's one individual that makes a mistake and we flatline the whole program. But you set them up for failure when you don't give them an opportunity to make a livable wage. And you're not going to draw what? The best candidates. You got to think about what will attract the best candidates. And I think we got to, let me say one more thing. Let me digress. We have to stop thinking about CVI as charity and more of an investment, and how it saves the entire ecosystem or economy money when we don't have to use law enforcement for overtime for investigating homicides. We don't have to use the court system for locking people up. So stopping homicide saved millions of dollars. My boss, Dr. Jens Ludwig, said each homicide costs about $2.5 million. So for every time they intervene on a homicide, they're saving $2.5 million of societal costs and about $1.5 million for every shooting they stop. When you think about surgery, taxpayers are saving money, so this is an investment.
But the logic is often missing in how the money gets spent, right? So one city I'm in, 2 great outreach orgs, we actually got them working together. We said, you guys take this part, you guys take this part. They've trained each other, they've supported each other, very different than a lot of cities. One organization starts hiring folks from the other organization because organization A pays better than organization B. So we're looking at the KPIs being like, well, we're not seeing as much from organization B as we want. What's going on? No, guys, they're getting hired by organization A. Well, now suddenly the logic is there of like, oh, we have a problem. We're missing something from our key performance indicators, and this organization really does need to get paid more. Instead, a lot of cities are just like, oh, that organization, apply, we'll give them $1 million. There we go. Well, that gets split up among 20 guys or whatever, and then you have an abysmal pay rate.
And I think to that point, what I've seen is more is not always better, right? You can have 15 underpaid, unhappy workers, and you got 8 guys and gals who are making a livable wage who is bringing it. And what we've seen just ensuring, like I know within the city, most case managers on the state average for case managers make about 42. As a social worker, I knew I couldn't pay my caseworkers that, right? So we almost was able to increase that by help of Joe Shu in 2023. Thank you, Joe Shu. But we've seen just a culture shift where people, because this is a tough job. You take it home, but to be able to take care of your family, to, for a lot of these individuals who have that lived experience, to ensure and to see this as a career, as a profession, is something that we're super excited to do within the city of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Can I
Joy?
just quickly add, one of the things we're trying to, the research team at Temple with our outreach workers and with the participants is thinking about what is it that the credible messengers are doing? What is the process that brings a high-risk young person into the fold in a sustainable way and keeps them there? Where we're looking at what are the skills and traits that individuals are using to do the hard work, right? So you're talking about maybe it doesn't matter money, there's dedication and commitment. How do we replicate that dedication and commitment? When we're talking about the worth of credible messengers and the people that are on the ground doing that, can we learn from them, right? So our portfolio of work that's coming out is looking at the skills and traits that we're saying, can we train on these? What is something that might be innate that you just have it, and you're a transformational leader as a credible messenger? Or what is something that we can train that Dion could say to his staff, here are the things we know are really doing long-term engagement and deep work where these young people are sticking with the program for years. How do we replicate that? So we're building that sort of curriculum on how do we replicate that and get it to scale.
Joy, let's do one more quickly.
Sure. Dion, Elaine Arndt in Baltimore has a question for you. With the coordinated response, do you see conflict with police investigation or pushback from the police department when implementing it?
No. And honestly, from there, when it's time for our law enforcement partners to do their investigation, they do it, as Adam indicated, in reference to some of the clearance rates. However, the work, despite the investigation, still has to happen. You know, I kind of adopted Estelle's methodology of that ready, set, go. I cannot sit on the sidelines and wait, right? So our law enforcement partners understand that. They accept that, and even though they may be investigating this particular perpetrator, there are other individuals a part of that individual's network that needs to be engaged, that needs to be serviced, and that's what we do. So we allow our law enforcement partners to do their due diligence, to do their work. However, it's still a community, it's still a network, it's still a zip code. There's still individuals in that particular community that need support, and we're not just going to sit on the sidelines. We're going to jump right into it, and we'll figure it out when we get there.
All right. I think we are unfortunately out of time, but thank you all for being on this panel, and thanks everybody for coming.